hello felts, and upcoming felts. In this video, I'm going to walk you through every single feature of felt. We're going to do a full deep dive. So whether you already have a felt account and just want to, get the full potential out of it, or whether you're absolutely new to felt and just want to learn what it's about, this is the right place for you. And on that topic, what even is felt? Well, you can think of felt as a web-based GIS app. Okay, let's break that down. So web-based because it is an app on your browser, so you don't have to install any software. And GIS means Geographical Information System. So it's a place where you can work, create, edit, and share geographical information, mostly maps. We can think of this as an analogy to, for example, Excel, which is a traditionally desktop, really powerful software for manipulating data, and then Google Sheets, which is kind of that online version that takes the concept but gives it a couple of superpowers, basically sharing and also collaborating with others in real time. And on top of that, one of the goals of felt is to not make GIS just pretty fast and powerful, but also make it delightful, make it fun. So I hope you'll have fun following this video. Now, there's going to be two ways to watch it. One is classically watching, let's say. You could just sit back, kick off your shoes, and keep on looking at your screen. But if you're into something a bit more interactive, I recommend you actually follow along. You create a felt account, pause me whenever necessary. And to do that, you might want to download the data from the links in the description. There's two there. One is a list of files that you can download to your computer to later upload, and the other is going to be something else. If you take a look, you can maybe guess what it's about. But I'll leave that as a surprise for now. Okay, so as I said, step number one is just creating an account, and you can do that here from the felt page by clicking on signing up or try felt for free. And that's going to take you to a place where you can either continue with a Google account, or you can create an account with the user and an email in a more standard process. So I've done just that. I've started off with a fresh account, and this is what we face for the first time, which is the felt tutorial. So it's asking me first a couple of questions just to guide my experience, what my level of map making experience, and what I want to make maps for. So I'm going to say I'm a beginner, and I'm going to use maps mostly for education and GIS in this case. I think that's accurate. Okay, and since I created an account using my @felt.com domain, it's also telling me, there are some teams that are available. Would you like to join them? Instead of doing this, I'm actually going to create a new team altogether. And I recommend you do this even if you're not thinking about working with people right now, because creating a team actually has a lot more uses, and it just kind of gives your felt superpowers. So let's go ahead and create a new team, and I'm going to call this the Felt Deep Dive team. I could also add an icon, an image, or I could invite some teammates by email. And I can also choose whether, as you just saw, people that with my domain can also sign up for this team or not. So in this case, I'm going to keep it private. I'm just going to untick this box and click create. And we now have our team. Okay, so it's the first time in felt, and we face this tutorial, learn to use felt. Now, if you're extra ambitious, you can go ahead, pause the video here and just go through the tutorial and kind of get a head start on all of us. But I'm just going to skip this for now because most of the concepts, or actually all of the concepts, we're going to touch in separately. So instead of doing anything on this map, I'm going to go to the felt home. Now, the felt home is this place where you can explore maps you've created, maps that have been shared with you, recent maps that you've viewed, maybe from others. And in this case, well, we have a series of example maps and the tutorial. We have another space called drafts for maps that have been made by yourself, because in recent we can also see maps made by others, and in shared with me, specifically maps made by others that have been shared with you. Instead, I'm going to go to my team, which is kind of a similar space, also empty for now, but not for long. And here I could see the maps that teammates of mine have created inside this team. You can always make maps in your personal space in drafts, or you can create them in your team. So for now, my team is empty, but I can already do some organizing here. So for example, I can create folders, and I'm going to create one for this tutorial. Let's go ahead and call it tutorial. That's a bit boring. Super tutorial. Yeah, why not? Okay, so I have a folder and it's empty. I'm going to create my first map. Wow. Okay, here we have it. Now I'm based in Spain, so this map automatically starts in a place close to my location. It's pointing me to the city of Bilbao. I'm actually based in the city of Madrid here, so that's where I'm going to go. But I I'd just suggest that you go to wherever city is comfortable to yourself, maybe someplace you've lived. If you want to follow my steps here in Madrid, you can do that too. But just kind of to customize this more to your own experience and needs. Okay, so we're in my city, we're in Madrid. First of all, let's explore what's going on. So we've got this big toolbar here at the bottom, which we'll be exploring in just a minute. We've got our scale, like many maps, and it's interactive, so I can see the scale bar right now in feet. If you'd rather switch that, I'm actually going to introduce you to one of the more powerful tools already, which is the Command K menu. So if you are on a Mac and you use Command K, if not on a Windows or Linux PC, you can use Control K. You can access this kind of super menu with a lot of shortcuts. And if you're lost at any time, you just might want to use this because there's a lot hidden here. Okay, so I'm going to use this to switch to metric units, which are more comfortable for me. But you can go back and do the same thing, Command K, and switch to US units if necessary. Okay, so the first thing we have in the top left corner is the felt menu. This is another place where there's a lot of stuff we can do. We can create new maps or duplicate the existing maps or do a bunch of stuff with files and additions. I'm going to leave that here for now. We've got the toolbar, as I said. We've got a couple of menus here in the top right. As you see, a very prominent one with sharing because, well, this is one of the main cool things that you can do with felt. And also a menu called the view menu. We're actually going to use this one right now because since we're going to be exploring the toolbar, we're going to want to use the element list. Okay, as you can see, it right now lists 0 elements and just one layer, which is the background. And talking about backgrounds, in the bottom right here, I can control whether I want to use the default base map, the satellite base map, or maybe some other kind of background that's offered either built in or from a URL, or even just a flat color. Maybe you don't want any background and you just want user to focus on your map. Cool. So, as I said, we're going to get started with the toolbar, and we're going to use the toolbar to create workspace elements. Now, what is a workspace element? Well, basically something that is created with the toolbar. And there's various types of workspace elements. So, for example, we have the pin tool, which lets us drop individual points, the route tool, the marker, clip, the layers menu, polygon tool, line tool, text, note, link, and upload anything. Now, don't worry, I'm going to go through all of these in just a minute. We're going to get started using the pin tool. So I can use the pin tool by either clicking on it and then clicking on a point in the map, or I can just directly drag and drop. And I'm going to drag and drop one here in the, I got it right in the center of Madrid, in a pretty well-known place, which is the Puerta del Sol. And let's just have some fun for a while creating elements in like well-known places of this city or other cities. So I can give my pin a name. I'm going to call it Puerta del Sol, which literally means the door or gate of the sun. So to represent that a bit better, let's give it a custom icon. I'm going to use a sun emoji. And I can also give it a little description if I want. So I'm going to say this is literally the center of the city. Okay, yeah, and maybe I can even upload an image, why not? So I actually have one around here. This is what it looks like, in case you ever visit. And I've created my reverse workspace element. Now, the pin tool isn't the only way to create pins. Another very common way, which I use a lot, is the search tool, which you can use to search for places, and the results will be added to your map. So in this case, I'm just going to add a couple more places that are interesting here in Madrid or are frequented by tourists. One is the Plaza Mayor. Okay, there we go. Another is the Prado Museum. Yep. Okay. But actually the most visited museum in Madrid is not the museum of the Prado Museum. It is the museum of the Santiago Bernabeu, which is the stadium for the Real Madrid Football Club. So let's add that one as well. Santiago Bernabeu. Okay, and I've got it over here. And let's just give it a little stadium emoji, because that's a lot funner. Okay, so I've added a couple of pins. My map of, let's actually give this map a name. Let's say what to see in Madrid. Okay, so what else can I do? Well, as I said, there's also a route tool, which, as you might imagine, draws a route between 2 points. We're going to use this to see how long it would take me to go from the Puerta del Sol to the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium. Okay, 2 clicks and I'm done. As you can see, this takes me through a bit of a weird route, and that's because this is for a car and driving in the city center is a bit complicated. So let's switch this to walking instead. Okay, that seems a lot straighter. And if I want to see how long this is 4.5 kilometers. So that's actually a pretty long walk. Or let's switch to US, that's 2.8 miles. So, I could take a long walk or maybe just take a cab or something else. Cool. Okay, so we've explored pins, we've explored route a little bit. Let's also explore what we can do with this. And by this, I mean one of the best known spots in Madrid, which is the Retiro Park. Okay, so this is a big area. I don't really want to put a pin on it because I don't think it would represent it justly. So instead, we're going to use another tool, which is the polygon tool. And it's just going to trace the park. And as you can see, it's quite simple. I'm just clicking, adding vertices as I go. Okay, if I click the end one, it's done. I can also add intermediate vertices. Oops, looks like this is coming out wrong, but that's okay because I can always just undo using Control-Z or Command-Z. Boom, boom, we're back. Okay, so once again, I'm just going to give it a name, the Retiro Park, and I'm going to give it a measurement, some area, so I can know how big it is. So this park is about 300 acres, so that's what, like a bit over a third the size of Central Park, which if I recall correctly is 850 acres or so. Okay, what else can I do? Well, as I said, I can give it a description. I can change the color. Let's give this one a green because it's a park. I could add an image, and I can also control the appearance. So for example, I can make the fill color more or less opaque. I can make the stroke around it more or less opaque. And I can also make that stroke maybe a bit thicker. Yeah, why not? Okay, and give it a nice dotted style. Okay, I like this. I'm having fun. So something else I can do, which is really useful when you're creating data in Felt, especially when you're collaborating with other people, is to add details to a place. So details is a kind of a menu where you can add pairs of keys and values, some information about the pins or the lines or the polygons that you're creating. So in this case, I'm going to add a couple of details, a couple of facts about the Retiro Park. It was built in, let's call this year built, in 1680. And it also has 18 gates all around it, which is quite a lot. Okay, so we're getting started. We've now created points through pins. We've created lines through a route, and we've created a polygon. There's actually another way to create lines as well. Simple, straight lines using the line tool. So let's explore that. And let's imagine more of a professional use case for a moment, something that, could actually happen in real life, which is that maybe I'm working for the city and we have to do some work here to replace the pipes because, well, they've broken. Or they're just old, or they need replacement for some reason. I'm not going to go deeper into this story. Okay, so once again, clicking on the last point finishes my line. I could add a distance around it. I don't really need it this time. Let's make it a bit thinner. And I'm just going to add some information about this. So for instance, this street will be closed tomorrow from 9 a.m. to noon. Okay. All right. I'm starting to annotate my map, not only create data as point lines and polygons, but also create context for it. And I can do that, as you saw, using the text tool or the note tool, or even by adding a link. You can literally add anything, an image, a YouTube video, play it inside Felt, whatever you want. Okay, so we now have this street that's going to be closed down, and maybe we want to notify the people that are living around it so that they can plan accordingly. So we could go ahead and use the polygon tool to trace all of these buildings, but I'm actually going to use one of Felt's superpowers, which is Clip. And Clip is a way of extracting information directly from the base map. You can extract administrative areas, or in this case, when you're zoomed far in, buildings. Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to just, you see these polygons have appeared in pink. I'm just going to click on them, and I'm generating these new polygons in the shape of buildings. I could do this one by one individually, but I can also use shift click drag to do a what's called a lasso selection to select all of these in groups. Okay, cool. Let's give these buildings a different color to differentiate them from the road. I'm actually going to make the road black here, and maybe let's make the buildings, what's a good color? Purple, why not? Okay, so once again, I can select each one individually. And as you can see, by the way, I'm just going to get myself out of the way. You can see that the element list is becoming quite populated. We have a lot of elements now, especially in the shape of buildings. If I click through the list, I get all these individually. I can multi-select one of them by shift-clicking through the list. And in this case, I'm going to do that to select all buildings and give them a different color, which now says mixed because I only made one purple, but I'm going to make them all purple and make them all slightly more opaque. Okay, so this is called multi-select. And there's actually a couple of ways of doing it inside Felt. I just showed you selecting through the list, but another way of doing this is to, as we did for the clip selection, we can shift, click, and drag. Okay, the bad thing is that in this case, for instance, I'll also be selecting the street line, which I may not want. I only want the buildings. So I'm going to use another technique instead. I'm going to right click, which is kind of like a left click, but apart from adding the menu for the element, it also gives me this right click menu, which has a lot of nice stuff in it. So I'm going to use a special power here called select similar to select all of the elements that have the same color. And with that, I selected all the buildings because they are all the purple elements. And remember how I added details for them? I can also do that now. So I'm going to say what street closed when tomorrow. And why not? Let's also do shift click drag to select one side of the street and add details just for that. Left side of the street, and shift click drag to do the same right side of the street. Okay, I've created some data. As you can see that I've only selected half the elements in the list right now. And talking about the list, my list is kind of getting a bit messy. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an element group. Since all these elements kind of go together, all the buildings, I'm usually going to want to work with them all together as well. So I'm going to create an element group. And to do that, I'm going to have to select them all. Let's do the list selection. Boop, I've got them. And now I'm going to press this button here to create a group. There is no existing groups right now. I'm going to create a new one. And we're just going to call this buildings or, buildings to notify, for instance. Okay, so one nice thing is that our list is instantly tidier because we can collapse or open again this group. We can also hide or show the visibility of the group, and we can also see that the group has now appeared in my legend. Legends are a place where both element groups and data layers live, and they're pretty nice because if I share my map, then users can toggle the visibility on and off. I also have more options, as you can see. I can edit the icons, or I could do a series of other actions specifically on this group. And in this case, I'm interested in doing one action, which is to export my data, because sometimes you want to take it somewhere else, and that's fine. Maybe you've created data collectively and you want to add that to OpenStreetMap, for instance. Maybe you want to take that to QGIS to do some analysis on it, to make your buffers and your filters and your transformations. So in this case, I'm going to export just the buildings, and as you can see, they get downloaded as GeoJSON directly to my downloads folder. Okay, finally, what else? We can do one more thing with elements, and I'm not going to get into the annotation part right now. I'm going to leave that for a bit later. Let's do one last thing, which is that, as I said, one of the best things to do in Felt is to interact, collaborate, share your maps. But understandably, there is an amount of maybe nervousness when sharing because you don't want other people to mess up your map accidentally. So what we're going to do to prevent that is to lock some of the elements here. I'm especially interested in this part here. The rest is kind of tourism, but maybe this is more professional, and I don't want this to be accidentally lost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these. As you can see, they now have pink outlines, pink envelopes, bounding boxes, and I'm going to lock them. And now they have a gray, dashed gray bounding box. Okay, what this means is that the element is now locked, so I can't accidentally move it or modify the title or modify the color or anything unless I unlock it specifically. It's just a bit of safety added to my elements right now. All right. This concludes part 1, which is working with workspace elements. That's probably a more appropriate title. Let's call that instead. Working with workspace elements. The toolbar. The toolbar. So phase number 2, I'm going to be talking about working with data layers, because another very frequent use case in GIS is not to create your own data, but to work with data that you've already acquired from other sources, maybe public data, maybe proprietary data. So if you're interested only in creating your own data, you might want to skip ahead to part 3 of this video, where I'm going to be talking about sharing and exporting your data, collaboration, and annotating your maps, and also allowing comments on them. But if not, well, join me in part 2. Oh, let's call this part 1. I like that. Part 1. Okay, so on to part 2. I'm going to go to the felt menu and just create a new map. Boop, I've got a new map. And let's take a look at the whole world in all its glory. All right, this is great. So let's call this part 2, uploading data. If you're following along and you haven't done it yet, now is a really good time to go into the to go and download those links that I shared before in the description of this video. You should be seeing a Google Docs, which we'll get into later, and a Google Drive folder. Just download the contents of the Google Drive folder, and they should come in as a zip file into your computer. Now, we could directly go and upload the whole zip file at once. In fact, feel free to do so if that's your thing. But instead, I'm going to open and just take a look at the contents of those files so we can see kind of different styles of data, different types of data that we can upload into Felt. For that, we're going to use the Upload Anything tool here at the right of the toolbar. It's got some sparkles because it's probably one of our coolest tools. And here I have it, feltdeepdive.zip. And here is the unzipped version. So we have a couple of different files in here. One thing we have is, let's start from the bottom. We've got a geotiff, so an image that is placed somewhere on the Earth. If you're familiar with the term, this is a raster data set. We've got a geo package that contains land use zones from the US Forest Service, so national forests in South California. We've got addresses for Starbucks in the Bay Area as a CSV, and we've also got a shapefile. And you might be thinking, well, there's 4 things left here. Actually, a shapefile is a multi-part format, so you need all 4 things, or sometimes even up to 6 things to be able to import in Felt or any other GIS. And normally when you try to upload this into another GIS, it just downright fails. One nice thing about Felt is that if you select just one part, people normally try to upload the .shp, thinking that's what shapefile means. Well, then you got this nice warning that says, hey, okay, you've got one of the components of the shapefile, but you need these other ones. We could combine those into a zip and drag them in, or we can also just drag them in all together. So I'm going to go, let's add this shapefile. Actually, let's just add everything all together. Cool. And while this uploads and processes, I'm just going to challenge myself to list. Let's see if I can say all formats that are supported by Felt before these finish. So we've said Esri shapefile and geopackage, but you also have GeoJSON, KML, KMZ, GPX, Garmin Fit, Garmin TCX, Garmin GPI, which are points of interest. There's already starting to come through. Let's go faster. Okay, we've said GeoTIFF, ASCs for raster. We have GeoPDFs. I'm starting to panic. And also a lot of formats that you can import that are not files that we'll look at afterwards as URLs. But just to spoil the surprise, we're talking about Esri servers, Google Sheets, hosted raster services as XYZ tiles. Okay, well, they're done. I didn't manage to say them all. So let's just go a bit through what we've uploaded into our map. So as you can see, we've got 4 layers in here. One is a point layer that says Bay Area Starbucks. I can press the overflow menu, zoom to fit to take a deeper look. I can also just double click if that's easier. Okay, I've got a raster called US MSR TIFF. This is actually a data set called the Gray Earth from Natural Earth for the contiguous United States. It shows basically relief, and it's nice to use maybe as a background or as context for the rest of your map. We've got the forests in South California. Let's drag them on top of this raster. I'm just going to make the raster go to the bottom so we can order things a bit better. And we also have, okay, a lot of polygons, one per county in the US with population per county. Okay, so let's see what we can do with this information. First of all, let's start maybe with the, let's start with the population per county. Okay, I'm just going to go and turn the visibility for all other layers off. Yeah, so we can just center on this one. And this is a data set that contains, as the name says, the population for each individual county. So we're going to just style this data so it represents that information better instead of just being everything green. So we can style by going onto the little pencil icon and opening the style menu. Okay, and as you can see here, we have a lot of options. So we can directly change the, kind of similar to elements, the fill color or the stroke color for these polygons, but instead I'm just going to directly create a new type of visualization. Instead of using a simple visualization, as is the case here, I'm going to go for a color range visualization. If you're familiar with the term, this is also what's called a Choropleth map, which shows a numeric variable represented by different colors and polygons. So right now we are coloring by the total population of each polygon, but this isn't a really great idea for Choropleth maps. Normally in Choropleth you want to show not raw values, but normalized values, because if the size of your polygons depend a lot, you'd expect like larger polygons to have more population. So maybe it's not going to represent your data as accurately. So instead of showing the total population, we're going to select a different variable and show the population density. Okay. And right now this is being, let's take a look at the legend. Yeah, we're seeing different intervals, different colors for basically very sparsely populated counties, going from almost 0 people to 183 per square mile to very densely populated counties. And just as we toggle the visibility for the layers on and off, we can toggle the visibility for the for the steps for the buckets on and off as well. So let's do that and maybe just take a look at, I'm going to hide the lower ones. And now we're seeing some of the most densely populated counties in the US. We can take that even further and use this button to show only the features that are in the ultimate bucket. And these are the most densely populated counties. So of course we've got a lot of cities on the East Coast. We've got some of the larger counties on the West Coast as well. This is Clark County in Nevada. Okay, what else can I do? Well, maybe I want to change a bit the way that, let me toggle on the visibility of everything again. I can just unclick that button. Yeah. Okay, I can also change the color palette that's being used, or maybe I can even change the categorization method so which one you're comfortable with this. So you can select different kinds of ways to break up your numeric variable into buckets. For example, for this case, where the data is very skewed, we might want to use geometric intervals, which represents, basically makes the spacing in the bucket different following a geometric series. Not going to get into it too much. Let's just make a couple more steps here. And as you can see, we have a very different map. So choosing the right way of creating buckets in a Choropleth map is super important. Okay, but let's not get hung up on this one. We have plenty more data sets to look at. So why not we look at the raster, the Gray Earth as well. Now, okay, as before, we can go ahead and edit this one and we can play with the opacity of it. As I said, this is a really good one to use as the background for other kinds of data. So you can immediately see that just setting the opacity a bit lower makes, kind of a nice blend between the base map and this raster. Okay, what else? We've also got the Bay Area Starbucks. This is just a point data set. It seems simple, but it's actually pretty interesting because, as you can see, the name says Starbucks addresses. So here we're starting to see one thing that's easy to do in Felt that is quite difficult to do in other kinds of GIS, which is to add data that doesn't have explicit coordinates. What I mean by this is that Felt does really well with formats that have explicit geospatial data, like shapefiles and GeoPackage and GeoJSON, but it also does really well with formats that have implicit geospatial data. So like spreadsheets, CSVs, or Excel files. So you can add a CSV that has, for example, latitude and longitude coordinates, and that works perfectly fine. But you can also add a CSV that has addresses. So let's take a look at the contents of this one, for instance. You'll see that it says found geometry in 100% of rows. We can learn more by going to the View Data panel and taking a look at our data. So this is the table that what my CSV looks like. And as you can see, it has an address field, a name field, a zip code field, and a customers served field. And it's telling me that the field that's being used for the geometry is address as the full address. So it hasn't used any other of the fields because this was enough information for it. Okay, we can close that off and do something similar. We can just style our points by different types. So maybe we could create a categorical map. We've already done color range, or maybe even a heat map showing just the density of where there are more Starbucks in the Bay Area. Okay. And finally, I'm going to go into our remaining last layer, double click to see it better, which are the land use zones in national forests of the US Forest Service in South California. Okay, so let's make a different kind of map this time. Once again, I'm opening the style editor, and instead of making a color range map, I'm going to make a categorical map. This is very useful when you want to make a map depending not on a numeric field, but on maybe on a text field, a categorical field. So I'm going to color by the LUZ lab field, which in this case is the category of the national forests. And I'm also going to pick up a different color palette, maybe, this one, or even this one. I like it a bit better. Okay. I can control a bit more in the style editor. For example, I can choose if I want to use some of the fields as a label. I'm going to use the same one that I'm using for the categories, but this is a bit dense, so maybe I'm going to make these labels smaller. Okay, and I can even change the style of them. So I'm going to do a pretty advanced trick to lower the amount of labels, which is to add padding around them, so they kind of kick each other out. Okay, so adding a padding of 10 makes the amount of labels a bit smaller. Nice. And just as I could do for a numeric visualization, I can also play with the categories here. And not only I as a map editor can, but also viewers that I share this map can as well. So I can control, hiding categories, and maybe I'm drawn to a special one. In this case, I'm quite fascinated by this experimental forest category. So let's go and show only this feature. Okay. And let's zoom in. Experimental forest. That sounds pretty cool. So let's investigate a bit more about it. Experimental forest, Los Angeles. Okay, apparently there's a forest called the San Dimas Experimental Forest. I'm gonna copy that page and add it as context to my map. Okay, now we're starting to do something called annotation, which is not only showing the data on my map or styling it, but also adding more context for viewers or even for myself. So here's a nice link just for anyone who's interested. Okay. Let's turn everything back on. And in case you don't have data to upload to Felt, well, you can always find public data online. For example, open data city portals, or government portals, or other places. Natural Earth is a great resource for global data. But even if you don't have any data yourself, you can always add data from the library. So if we open here, you'll see that Felt is already powered with almost 100 layers that you can add to provide context to your map. Let's just add some of them to play around. I'm adding bathymetry, which means ocean depth, bicycle lanes from OpenStreetMap, buildings for the whole world, from the daylight map distribution, and also gradicules, which is very common to give context in a map. Okay, so this now looks kind of intense, but let's play with what we've already learned. So we can toggle the visibility of certain categories in the gradicules on and off, or the whole layer. We probably can't see the buildings from this far out, but if we were to zoom in, let's say to Manhattan, okay, this is starting to make a bit more sense now. We can see all the buildings in Manhattan and also all the bike lanes, and we can choose to, I don't know, make these buildings orange instead, or blue. Yeah, maybe a dark blue better. Okay. And the same goes for the bike lanes. So Felt just already has like these very common reference layers that you can use to start building your map. We've seen a lot of people interested in bike lanes for cycling advocacy, or maybe roads to provide context, or kind of create your own base map, which is a fun thing to do with the land and the oceans and seas layers, or the railway tracks and stations. We've got some interesting categories as well, more about common boundaries, mostly in the US, but some international as well. Infrastructure for the whole world, nature and exploration, national parks, etc. Or even science, volcanoes, basins, watersheds, meteorites. Okay, so let's get back to that South Carolina land use zones, and let's talk a bit more about annotation. I'm going to turn that layer on, okay? And as I said, well, actually, this seems like a nice natural breaking point for part 3. So I'm going to leave it here. Feel free to pause and, take a rest, grab a coffee or whatever. And let's go on to the next part. And to do that, I'm going to want to create a new map, but I want to bring some layers with me. So instead of having to upload them again, I'm going to do something that's really cool, which is publishing a layer to my own personal team library. So just as we have the Felt data library that has all of these layers, we can also create a team library. Well, we already have it. It just doesn't have any layers right now. So let's open the overflow menu for this legend item, this layer, and go to publish layer to team. And we can add it to our team, the Felt Deep Dive team. As you can see, the thumbnail gets automatically populated. I'm just going to publish it. Okay. The fact that this layer has been published means that it is now in my library. The thumbnail will appear in a few minutes, and I can just add it just as I did from any of the Felt library layers. So publishing a layer to a team is really, really useful in case you find yourself uploading the same kinds of data again and again. Maybe it's boundaries, maybe it's, I don't know, anything that you use commonly in many maps. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new map. And this time, instead of creating a new map directly, I'm going to go to the home again. As you can see, I've got my maps, I've got my super tutorial, which is already in the nice folder. I've got my part 2 uploading data. Let's take that into the team as well. So to do that, I'm just going to go and move the map and put it inside the super tutorial folder. Starting to regret that name. Okay, let's show the folder. And we're going to create part 3. Part 3. Sharing and more. Sharing and collaborating. Okay. So to kick off this map, I'm just going to go and add the data layer that I published to my team library before, so I don't have to upload it as a file once again. Okay. Oh, I just realized, actually, we have something interesting to still do in part 2. So let's go back for a minute to the home, because I forgot a big category of data formats, which is formats that are not in files, but that are hosted on the web already. So let's turn off these layers. I'm going to delete some of them that I don't need. For instance, the data library ones, the gradicules and the buildings and the bicycle lanes and the bathymetry. And we're going to do something really cool, which is adding data from an external source, from a URL. So remember the links that I shared before? Well, there's another one, a Google Doc here, called Felt Deep Dive URL imports, and it's just links to a series of URLs that we're going to import data from into Felt. So the first one, kind of similar to the CSV, is a Google Sheet. And in this case, it's a Google Sheet of RUT, which is a measurement of how impressive, how sharply or impressive the surroundings of a city are in terms of mountains, basically the mountain backdrop of a city. So we've got this Google Sheet that has the 100 cities that have the most impressive mountain backdrops to them. We've got cities like Los Angeles, for instance, or Innsbruck in Austria with the Alps, or Fuji with Mount Fuji in the background. You've definitely seen pictures of that one. And this is also really easy to bring into Felt. So we're going to do that by just going to Share and letting anyone with the link access this file. We can copy that link and go back to our Felt map. And in this time, we're going to go to the Felt menu, File, Add from URL. Okay, and if we paste this URL and just press Add Layer, in exactly the same way as a file that we've uploaded via Upload Anything or via dragging and dropping, we're going to be able to add this information into Felt. Okay, it's almost processed. This is for the whole world, so I'm just going to zoom out there and prepare. And there we have it, point dataset by RUT. Okay, let's give this a nice style. I haven't used point by size yet, so let's do that. Sizing points by a variable, and in this case it's by the intensity of RUT. Instead of in a continuous way from the minimum to the maximum value, I'm going to set breaks again, and maybe, yeah, okay, that's looking good. So we're seeing the top 100 cities by RUT. We've got the lower of the 100, for example, Manisa in Turkey, or Amal in Iran, and then we've got a lot of really high contenders in both North and South America, mostly along the Andes Mountains. For example, there's the city of Arequipa in Peru, which has a really impressive volcano. Right next to it, some cities in the Alps, and then of course we've got the Himalayas. Okay, what else can we add externally? Well, apart from Google Sheets, we can also add something you may or may not be familiar with, which are Esri servers. So an Esri server is basically a page that looks like this. This is the metadata page for a map server that contains a series of layers about Glacier National Park in the United States. So many times if you're going through public data, you might end up on a page like this and not really know what to do. Maybe you can't export any files from it, but fortunately Felt knows how to read it. And all we have to do, as before, is copy the URL, go back to our map, File, Add from URL, and paste. And in this case, the default name isn't really great, so let's just call it Glacier National Park. And once again, it's processing. Okay, let's clean this up a bit. I'm going to hide the visibility for the RUT one. And this time we're pulling all those different layers that we saw. Let's go back to the server for a second. We're going to pull all this different information. So the boundary of the National Park, but also the surface area in 1966, 1998, 2005, and 2015. Okay, let's see how our progress is doing. It just finished. Awesome. We can press zoom to fit to automatically go to the area where the data is. And as you can see, well, we've got different data sets inside our data layer. Inside Glacier National Park, we've got the boundary. Let's just zoom in to understand the data a bit better. And we've got the surface area of glaciers, of the ice, in the year 1966, then 1998, then 2005, and then 2015. So it's pretty clear that unfortunately the glaciers are receding and there's less and less ice every time. Okay, we've got one more big category of hosted services. Apart from files, by the way, any file that is hosted onto the internet that you can drag and drop into Felt, you can also add in this way. But we've got one more category, which are hosted raster tiles. So many times raster datasets are very heavy or they cover very large areas, and instead of being served as static files, they're served as tiles from a server. And those can also be imported into Felt. So going back to our doc, here we have it. We have 3 different types of raster tile services that are supported. We support XYZ tiles, which are maybe the most common one, TMS tiles, and WMTS tiles. I'm not going to get into the difference of each one. You can watch and learn a bit more in the short videos about each and every one of these, but I'm just going to go once again, and copy paste, add from URL and paste. Okay, so in this case, we're adding a full base map called the Stamen watercolor base map, which is kind of like a fun twist. Instead of being used more for contextual information, we can use this one more for artistic purposes. And just in the same way that we did for a raster generated from a static file, we can maybe change the opacity on this one, lower it to make it a bit more transparent, and maybe push it to the back. Okay. Another kind of hosted raster service is TMS. You'll see that all these services have these template parameters, Z, X, and Y in curly brackets. In the case of TMS, the Y is negative because it just means that the Y coordinate is flipped as opposed to X, Y, Z. Add from URL once again. And in this case, we have a map, a historical map of the city of Aberdeen in Scotland. So let's go to the city of Aberdeen. Yep, there we are. And I'm going to turn off the Stamen tile so we can see it better. We've got these tiles from a historical map of the city of Aberdeen. Isn't that cool? Okay, finally we have one more category, which is WMTS tiles. In this case, the URL is a lot longer just because it's a bit of a more complex server format, but it works just the same. All we need to do is make sure that there's that Z, X, and Y, and also that the tile matrix set says Google Maps compatible, because that's the same coordinate reference system that Felt uses. I'm not going to get into the details of that too much, but just go ahead and add from URL. Okay, there we go. And this time, this raster tiled service, zoom to fit doesn't work on this one. It says the data needs to be manually located the first time, but if I go and find it on the map, which I hope I will, yeah, I know where this one is because it is a raster service for Spain. So there we go. The tiles are starting to load. You can see this is a pretty heavy one, and we just got this notice, zoom to fit has been updated, which means it works again, because now we've started requesting and finding tiles, and Felt just knows how to zoom, where to zoom in the next time. So this is a colorized digital surface model, which means we're seeing basically the elevation of different points, and some color has been added for context. So we can see the the blue on lakes, and we can see kind of green on trees, and we can see red on rooftops and cities, and we just have this elevation data at a really, really high scale. Okay, now we can go back to part 3. Sorry for this interruption. I'm just going to go back to my home and back into my sharing and collaborating map. Okay, so we've added a layer from our data library, from our library that we've posted into this new map. And what we're going to do is use annotations to provide some more context and prepare this map to be in more of a finalized ready state. So as I said, I was interested in the experimental forest in San Dimas in Los Angeles. So I'm just going to go in, and instead of just selecting that visibility as I did last time, I'm going to do something special, and I'm going to clip it out, because clip also works on data library layers. So what clipping is going to do is it's going to transform, let's try that again. It's going to, there it is. It's going to transform that feature in a data layer into a workspace element, and I can work on it individually, because data layers are styled by rules, as you saw, but elements can be styled individually. So I'm going to just, make this one a lot more obvious, so we can create a map with a little story about the San Dimas experimental forest. So to do that, let's maybe add a note. This is the San Dimas experimental forest. I can use the marker tool. Maybe I'll make the tip quite thin and just point an arrow to it. Okay. And then, as I had before, I'm going to copy the URL for the Wikipedia article and paste it over here. Okay, so I'm starting to compose a story now with annotations, and this map is ready to be shared with coworkers, colleagues, friends, whatever you're using your map for. So to do that, I'm going to go into the share menu. The share menu is on the top right corner, and it's the place where I can add people individually by email, or I can manage permissions for people in my team, or I can invite people to my map using a link, just as I did with Google Sheets before. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to add anyone by email. I'm just going to copy the link for a map, which by default can be viewed by people with the link, but not edited. Okay, so let's enter a viewer. Let's just open a new browser. And as you can see, I'm in an incognito window, so this other browser window doesn't have any like login or anything. And I'm just going to copy and paste the map. All right, and you can instantly see that I can see that there's another user, anonymous anglerfish, floating around in my map right now. And they can view my map, and they can toggle the legend and toggle these items on and off, just as we did before as an editor, but they can't do anything else. They can't add workspace elements, they can't add data library layers or anything. I could configure the settings here to, for example, allow anyone to view, comment, and edit, for instance. So any other person with a felt account here could maybe create this map with me. But instead, I'm going to set a special permission, which is only commenting permission, viewing and commenting. And doing this enables public commenting on my map, which is pretty cool because it's a kind of a middle ground between viewing and editing. It lets people interact with my map without modifying it. So if I go to the viewer, the anonymous user here, and refresh, as you can see, they now have a new button that says comments list. And if they click on this button, they can add a comment. So for example, they can say, hey, I was in this forest last year. And they could add a name if they also wanted to, or an email. They're going to post this comment. Okay, so going back to the editor's map, let me just get the legend out of the way so it's a bit cleaner. I can now see that there is a map, there's a comment by an anonymous user added to my map, and I can answer this. That's pretty cool. Or I could mention people specifically. I can submit my comment, and I can also get a list of all the comments inside this comments list. Let's add some more. Anyone know anything about this place? I wonder what kind of experiments they do. As you can see, the comments list is updating on both sides. From the viewer, I can also see this comment. So I don't know if anyone were to maybe add a comment that's inappropriate, or I just don't really want this kind of content here, I could resolve the thread, or I could even delete it altogether. And if I've been collecting public feedback, maybe for some kind of public planning project, I could also go into the comments list and download all of the comments as a CSV with latitude, longitudes attached to it, or as JSON, or as whatever. So it's a really powerful way of collaborating with other folks. Okay. Finally, there's a couple more things. Well, just a note, actually. Viewing and commenting works on desktop, but it also works on mobile, and we can simulate that by making this viewer window a bit smaller. Yeah, so as you can see, the layout in the menu has kind of changed a bit. So now instead of having the comment button at the top as I have for the editor, I have it here at the bottom right. And if I click on it, instead of directly clicking where I want to comment, I can pan and zoom the map around and the comment location stays pinned. So this is a more natural and useful interaction on a phone. But apart from that, the comment works just the same. So I could add here, like, why is the use restricted? Okay, I could add a name and an email, and I can post. All right, so we've already talked about creating data. We've talked about adding, uploading data. We've talked about annotating my map and sharing it. But sometimes you want to take your maps out of the internet. Maybe you want to add it to a document. Maybe you want to I don't know, even just print it out on paper. So you might be tempted to create a screenshot, just take a screenshot of the map, but that's not going to work very, very well, just because you want some more resolution normally. So what you can do is go to the Felt menu, File, and download the map either as an image or as a PDF. In both cases, you'll be prompted whether you want to include the legend or not, and you can just press export. And what this will do is it will create an image that has a resolution that's 4 times the size on your screen. So a lot larger than you get with a screenshot. And then afterwards with this image, it's been downloaded already. There I have it. I have an image with my legend as I selected of my map. And that's going to work for, whatever my viewport is at the time. Okay, so there's one last thing. Maybe you've been crafting your map. You've been making it for your business. You've been, let me turn off the comments. You've been making it for a blog post. You've been collecting comments, whatever it is, but maybe you want to take this map instead of to share a felt link, you want to put it on your website. So it's also really easy to embed a felt map. And to do so, once again, you can go to the Felt menu. Let me move myself. Go to the Felt menu, go to File, Embed. And in this menu, you will get some options to configure an iframe, if you're familiar with this term, which is basically some HTML code to add a felt map inside your website. Okay, so we can choose between different sizes, large, medium, small, or custom. We can pan around here and select a specific view. That's going to be the default view for people seeing the map inside our website. For example, I might like this one that's kind of more centered on the annotations. And I can just copy to my clipboard all this code. So actually, let's just make a minimal example. Here I have some code, a mini website of sorts with some basic HTML for the head and body and a title, embedding a felt map. And I can go and paste this iframe code here and then save it. And if I now open that HTML inside my browser, I will have this mini website that has my felt map embedded into it. Okay, that's, I think, almost everything. It's already been an hour, so I don't want to go on much longer. There is some stuff that I haven't touched on, but just so you know, if you're maybe more of an advanced user, you're a developer, Felt does have an API to do a lot of these actions programmatically, so you can create maps or delete them. You can upload data library layers programmatically. And one really interesting use of that API that we've developed is a plugin for QGIS. So if you are already familiar with QGIS, maybe you're a QGIS user and you're looking for Felt as a place to share your maps online, you can use the QGIS plugin to do so. So I'm just going to quickly open QGIS on my computer. Might take a bit, hopefully not too long. There it is. It's setting up. Almost in. There we go. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Felt plugin, which I have here, to push data from QGIS to a felt map. So you can install the plugin from the official plugin repository. You could search for the Add to Felt plugin. I already have it installed. So I'm just going to add some simple data to QGIS. For instance, this shapefile of countries from Natural Earth. I think I talked about this before. And now I'm just going to push this to a felt map. So using the QGIS plugin, I have to log in. Do I authorize the plugin in this account? Yes, I do. Okay. And now I can go and from QGIS create a new felt map. I'm just going to go with the default name, untitled QGIS map, and add to felt. It's uploading the data just as if I would have uploaded it from a file. And if I now open, I have a new map made from QGIS where the data is now being uploaded to Felt. So it's almost there. This is a data set for just countries in the world. And as you can see, here is the, here's the view in QGIS, and here is the view in Felt. So very similar. The style has even come along as well. Okay, well, this is the end of the tutorial, the deep dive. I know it's been a lot. Hope you've been pausing and taking rests. But anyway, as you can see, Felt is just a very powerful tool that's getting powerful by the minute. It's also a great tool to use as a companion to other GIS, desktop GIS like QGIS. And we hope you use it to share and also find some delight in this beautiful software product we're creating. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.